Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Menger Institute podcast. Today we have a very special guest. He's a dear friend of mine. He is a doctoral student, and he is Riccardo Rossi. Riccardo, welcome to the Menger Institute podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matthew. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yes, I want to talk about where we met. So we met in 2019 at the Severo Institute in Prague, studying the PPE program, Politics, Philosophy, and Economics, at the Severo Institute. Yeah. How was that experience for you?
It's fantastic. Actually, I remember we were the only two people not involved in big groups, people from Arizona or Tennessee. So it was fantastic. We hung out super well since the beginning, and we found common ground of understanding. There were many philosophers. We were more inside of politics and economics, so we had great debates. And Severo Institute, it's one of the best places in Europe where to think as libertarians or classic liberals.
Mm-hmm. I remember that was the year after I went to the Mises University, and I was very Rothbardian at the time. I had a lot of pleasure debating the philosophy grad students who were more socialist. But yeah, that was a very pleasant time. So since then, what have you been doing?
At that time, I was a master's student in a business school in Rome, Louis, studying quantitative finance. Then in 2020, after a small experience in another very free market friendly university, HSE in Moscow, full of economists that helped the Russian Federation to do the transition to a market economy, so I could find many Hayekian networks there. I spent 3 months there. When I went back in 2020, I moved to Milan from Rome to start to work in a bank in asset management, but my dream was always to pursue an academic career, so I resigned in 2023, applied to PhDs in America, got few offers, moved to Boston in Brandeis University 2 years ago. Fantastic experience. Before to arrive to Boston, I stopped for the summer 24 in Riccardo Institute. So our house, one of our houses, one of the, stars in American framework. As you know, it's always a great experience. So.
Yeah, so I remember when we first met, you were studying a lot of Friedrich von Hayek's work, and you really taught me a lot about Friedrich Hayek's work, but maybe if you could share with the audience the significance of Friedrich von Hayek.
Of course. Hayek, I started, my interest for this stream, this school of tradition, as literally Hayek calls the classic liberalism, sparked with the most important scholar of Hayek in Italian framework, who died 2 years ago, Lorenzo Infantino. I came across randomly with him with an elective exam in my bachelor. He changed literally my life, both as a person and as a thinker. So Hayek didn't start as an economist. His father was a biologist, so he always studied this evolutionism stuff. And I discovered the main take from the Hayek teaching is to investigate the origin of social sciences. So at the end of the day, is a matter of knowledge. Theory of knowledge from Hayek heritage, it's at the base of everything we are discussing. So you can recollect economic insights and politics and philosophy, and it's so important. It's so important to understand the basics, to understand that the knowledge is spread among individuals, these fragments of time and place. So if you understand this properly, reading these 2-3 key Hayek inherited masterpiece, you can deal with your life. And to close up about Infantino, my master situation, he was the person who wrote the most important letter for me when I applied to move to America. So I will always be grateful for these 10 years of friendship. He's like a grandfather, really a star.
Wow, awesome. And how has your time been in the United States?
States, land of opportunities, is where I wanted to land since always. My other master in the quantitative finance side and a very good macroeconomist now in Switzerland, Pierpaolo Benigno, he always spoke in class about these only possibilities for who aspires to do a PhD to be in America. If you take the list of the first 250 departments in economics, you see that America dominates incredibly. There are very good places in the rest of the world, in Europe, even in Italy, one, two, but they are small, happy islands in a network that is lacking a good networking effect. In America, wherever you go, I've been very lucky to land in Boston because, there are like 500 schools in the Boston area. So wherever you go, you find interesting people to talk, even in a restaurant or the cinema for some festival. So America is fantastic. It's where I want to stay, and we will figure it out if in the industry or in academia. But it's the starting point, but at the same time where I wanted to land since my bachelor.
Nice. I think you really inspired me about, I don't want to say romanticizing the intellectual life and pursuing intellectual studies in a PhD program, but you've definitely put it into perspective of just how wonderful an opportunity that is.
It takes a great vocation to sacrifice. It's not an easy life to be a doctoral student, but I think yields a very, very, very good satisfaction to study at theoretical level thematics that interest you. This is, by the way, the first requirement to be successful in academia. It's the most important. Let's recollect the three pillars of our intellectual framework: Smith, Riccardo, and Hayek. Smith, division of labor; Riccardo, trade benefits for comparative advantages; and Hayek, division of knowledge. So academia taught me that you should pursue your niche, you should investigate vertically in what you like, and then the stars will align, the dots will be linked. So don't try to follow the trend, try to investigate, to discover something new, and be very, very, very close to your advisors. Pick very good people, pick very suitable in perspective masters who can teach you the methods and the topics. And PhD life is simply fantastic. It takes many sacrifices, especially approaching deadlines. The rest of the time you can wander a bit more, even in vacation. Now we are not in our cities where we live, and we can walk in the city, explore situations, the urbanistic, the development, and even these things can spark you ideas of research. Go back and write in the night as a genius, as you used to do.
Yeah, we are in San Diego, downtown. Are you named after David Ricardo?
Sorry? No. A very, very good joke. When I deal with my Spanish friends, they always do this mistake, Riccardo. My name is Riccardo with 2C, and they call me Riccardo. But I'm honored, And David Ricardo is not originally from some Latino or Hispanic family, so in British way it's another pronunciation. It's Riccardo. So Italian way it's tough to pronounce Riccardo.
How is Italy doing?
One of the reasons, to go back to your question about America and PhD, one of the reasons why I moved here is twofold. I don't believe in Europe and I believe in America. Going back to my field, the way America innovates bottom up with these poles of academia and industry are the benchmark in the world, have been the benchmark since many decades, more than a century. Instead, my love Europe is still pretending to innovate from top down with dictating the innovation and the exploration of the new ways to know things and to process in the scientific knowledge closer to the Soviet way, the Chinese and Russian way. differently to the American way. You know, they pretend to, as you see in the examples, to be more practical about policy in Brussels with these cars, the Green Deal. They don't know what to do the whole day. So they are sitting, they are paid. In Italy, we say we are there to warm their chair, so they sit doing nothing. So they're talking like us, and they pretend to dictate from top down this new technological and green revolution. This is just an overcome of Chinese competitiveness with respect to our Western one. We are not doing a favor to our liberal and democratic Western civilization and society. We are doing a favor to some Eastern country. So the winning way to innovate is the American one. A good scholar for some topic, not good scholar for other ones, is Krugman. We can say is the Milton Friedman of our age. You can pick 5-10% of right things he said, and the rest we leave for another episode. And he theorized a bit about this aggregation of industry and academia. Is really the winning example. In California, where you're from, it's fantastic. They call the University of California networks in Bay Area, and Boston is more or less the Bay Area of the other coast. So I see with my eyes this blend of success, and this is the reason that made America great and will make America unreachable for the competitors in the short and medium term, at least.
Yeah. Well, I like that you're bullish on America.
My job was as an asset manager to try to address some deviation from the classical Morgan Stanley world passive indexing, and I always tilt to the American bullishness and the places in the world who don't grow, like Europe, underweighting them. Many reasons. You see, the capital, physical and human capital, keep flowing to America. So this is an indicator. You know, we are not doing the interest of our people. We are doing our self-interest, both as a persons and as an investor. So we invest. We are in America. We have our mine few investment, you're a bit higher investments in America. So we are investing our lives here. This tells a lot. It's not a random choice. It's a choice of many of the smartest people in the world flying to America, staying here, building up here, contributing to this very, very suitable environment for innovation, exchange of ideas, and many very, very good unintended consequences.
Yeah. In Italy, what's like the cultural sentiment of the lay people in regards to economics or politics even?
The common thread is you can see the difference if you know American situation. In America, if you wanna develop an idea for your life, for your business, everyone is encouraging you. There is cooperation. There is a positive environment where to develop, invest. In Europe, especially where I come from, Italy, it is very, very conservative in the religious sense. You know, I was born and grew up for 25 years, 10 minutes far from Vatican City. Someone claims that this is the reason why Italy is not so prone to innovate. You know, the church is always breaking with innovation, careful, dogmas. Before to challenge dogmas, we have to be very careful. So this is the mental framework you can see more or less on average in Italy, and this is decline into economics, people not being willing to take new initiatives. They're always careful. There is a privilege to be employed, not self-entrepreneurs. This tells a lot. In politics also, you know, all the spectrum of politics, we have less than 1,000 parliamentaries. You can count on two hands the classic liberal parliamentaries. In America, I think situation is a bit better, but on average in Europe it's like this, especially the more you move out from the periphery of Europe, the more you find this kind of conservative and a bit like parasites, trying to steal things from the center of Europe, from taxpayers in German areas. So sorry if I'm speaking about Europe, but I see the problem broader to Europe. Italy is just one not influent declination of this. And by the way, Italy is divided in Germanic Italy, that is the north of Italy, linked in this manufacturing industrial network with Germany, and south of Italy, it is like the rest of the periphery of Europe, not doing reforms, keep surviving with the subsidies by the Central Europe taxpayers. So it's not a way to grow, I don't want to go too much farther, but if you see the identity of any budget constraint of any person or firm, this identity bounds the amount of earning to something in the other side of the equation. If you raise the taxes in this right side of the equation of the identity, you have to lower something else. Usually they are the investments where you should be more elastic and flexible. So if you tax more, you have less room for investments. This means that with respect to the other political, legal, economic systems in the world, you lose competitiveness. This is the reason why America is still the place to be, still leaves room for investing, because the welfare state, despite its growing, is not as big as the European one.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask about history, the history of Italy and Rome. Someone asked me, why do we talk about so much the history of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire? And, I thought it was because it was the historical precedent for the future empires to come. And also there's a lot to learn in that history, I think. But in Rome and Italy, is there a emphasis on studying this part of the history?
Yes, there is a debate currently with the small classic liberal party called Ora, now in the center of the spectrum, of course, who's claiming, the founder, of course, is a very, very esteemed professor who made his career in the States, now in St. Louis Washington University in St. Louis, Michele Boldrin. He claims that in Italy we have to get rid of this humanistic, historical, historicist tradition of teaching, whose favorable person claim that can open your mind, develop the critical thinking, but at the same time admitting that 80-90% of notions you learn over these 10 years of serious studies since you're 6 years old until 14-16 years old, it's wasted. It's a series of notions about history, literature, while at the same time, in the same years, you can learn some more practical language, especially I'm looking at STEM, technology, informatic languages that can at the same time open your mind and leave you something practical for the life. Then, if you have passion, if you have time, if you can keep the pace of the job market, you can leave room for some parallel passion and go to read poetry. That's always pleasant. But if you insist in something totally useless, that you keep teaching only in Italy, this big empire 2000 years ago, it's pointless. It's beautiful, but you can read the page in a museum once you go to the museum, because you can read this page after having gotten a good education to read it. You don't need to spend 10 years in studying how good was Rome in building a Colosseum in the Mediterranean area.
So let me ask you, what's been on your mind the most and the most precedent that you want to discuss?
Give me some more hint. What are you thinking about?
Well, okay. What's on my mind, because I have you here, I'm curious about the Renaissance. And I feel like it's almost controversial, but I was reading a part in Mises, The Ultimate Foundations of the Economic Science, where he said, what brought about the Renaissance, what brought about the Enlightenment, what brought about 19th century liberalism was the free enterprise system, the freedom to think, to speak, to interact, to build, combined with capital accumulation. And and then I think you mentioned, I forget, some philosopher. But the question is, why didn't the Greeks, if they had all this knowledge, not build steam engines? And this philosopher said, well, because it would smell bad. But they didn't have the capital accumulation that allowed them to develop further in their technology. So I'm curious just a bit more, because I haven't read too much about the Renaissance, but I'm curious what you think. Was Da Vinci, was he sad? Someone told me recently that he didn't finish a lot of his projects and he felt like he wasted his life, and I'm like, I don't know about that, but compared to like Michelangelo. But what about this?
Of course, I'm not an expert in this. I just know a few principles that help me to recollect some idea and strengthen my framework of things, of understanding. I can say that what made this era very, very interesting and great was some kind of, it's called the Age of Commons. We have these commons, these cities, something in Veneto, near Venice, something in Tuscany. So these political areas were very, very autonomous. They were controlling the region, they were managed very well, and they were in competition. So that was a very favorable framework and environment to develop some very, very, very good dynamic of capital accumulation and investment in otium and negotium. Cicero called means some duty that you have to do for work and something that you can cultivate as a passion, like arts, poetry. So it was very fruitful era because there was a good blend of the two, and this competition between commons allowed the best artists, literates, scientists to move where they got the best offer around Italy. And we are enjoying the inheritance of this in many, many fields. If you think the first banks were born in Firenze, Bardi, Peruzzi, they still have these families in Firenze. They were banks. Banco is like the counters, so it's literally how they were collecting gold, jewels, promising to give at the same time to their friend in another city the same responsibility, so you can exchange these papers. And this was some kind of germs of free banking, before the state took the step in and intervene with these issues that we know today, and since more than a century ago. So banks or partita doppia, the way to take the accountant of the balance sheet, the current account. It's something born in Veneto, Padua, a famous city for Giotto, in Venice. It was super good discovery. So as we can see, both in negotium, serious stuff, finance, economics, and in otium, the artists that you mentioned, Michelangelo, Leonardo, were super beautiful parentheses of Italian history. Maybe at the time Italy was leading the world. Then we left the stage to Netherlands. That is another relatively underrated framework in the recent history of the world, last 5 centuries. Maybe not everyone knows that Netherlands was was the benchmark of the world at a certain time. Maybe some stories here and there are famous, like the bubble of the tulipans, but this was born because Netherlands is another great example of living the freedom to trade, to develop, to invest with the rest of the partners all over the world, and in an era that was characterized by this exploration through the sea all over the world to trade. And Netherlands is a page I suggest to our public to develop, because it's very interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, but I let me come back to you. I want to propose the question for your questions. I don't know what's on your mind.
I always like, in our interactions, how I'm more in the side of classic liberalism. I'm biased by this inheritance of Lorenzo Infantino, my master. You have been always a bit more skeptical in leaving a small room for the state, minimal state. You've always been very, very, very for privatizing everything, and I think it's interesting to see how you see maybe justice to be privatized, police. I don't know. Do you still leave a small room for a minimal state, or you're?
Absolutely not. No, I am extreme anarcho-capitalist privatization of everything, including justice. Because when justice is monopolized, then it can be manipulated, and that's what legislation is the making and the changing of laws. And a good book on this is Hoppe's From Aristocracy to Monarchy to Democracy, and he talks about from the aristocratic kings, they developed constitutional monarchs. And the Constitution was used to centralize and formalize the state power. So the aristocratic kings were under the law. People knew this. The king couldn't change the laws, so people would go to the king or other nobles and be like, okay, help us solve these disputes. So you had your form of arbitration, and then once you had the constitutions come along, the constitutional monarchs, it centralized it, and then you had your constitutional democracies. And this did not protect the people from the governments, it protected the governments from the people, because people obey the constitutions. But the constitutions, as Lysander Spooner points out, is only binding for the people who signed it. It's not binding on me. I didn't sign it. So it's not applicable to me. But that's the justification for making laws, changing laws, and being above the laws. And for example, I was talking with a friend yesterday that former President Joe Biden issued a presidential pardon for the future for Dr. Anthony Fauci. So Anthony Fauci, even though we know that, like, for example, this virus, which killed millions, was developed in a lab under his organizations, he's not going to be punished at all. And say what you will about the situation, but that's the power of the government, that the government has that. Even President Trump has, like, pardoned himself. So this is the example of the government running legislation. In the market for legislation, you would have companies, arbitrators, and mediators, and people go to them to solve disputes. You have tort law. Professor John Hassness, he's lectured for Menger. He does a lot of good work on this. He's at Georgetown. And he talks about, all laws come from the market with the trial and error process of resolving it. And you would just have agencies that are arbitrators and mediators. And I think it comes down to, punishment theory of, like, if someone drives drunk in this country, they lose their license for a year. Why not a year and 1 day? Why not half a year? It's uniform punishments where it should be unique punishments for every situation, every crime. And I think because we don't have the markets, we don't see what real punishment theory would be. We think it's imprisonment. It'd be probably more like restitution. If I chop off your arm, you can't work. We make a calculation that I cost you $100 million worth of labor, so then I have to work to pay this back. So punishment in the free market may be more severe than under what we have today. And that's just to finish this rant, that's the form of justice that they talked about in the Enlightenment period, that over punishment is a form of injustice and under punishment is a form of injustice. So you need the right balance. And when you monopolize it with the government, which is the biggest monopolist on police, legislation, power, then you're going to get, the problems with no economic calculation, shortages and surpluses.
So the first requirement is, Hayek was writing about the features of the law to be general and abstract, in order not to be ad personam, like indexed to any precise situation. It should be generalized and abstract. So what do you think about the last resort of enforcing the social order, the social stability, if there are any controversies among different tribunals, who should decide in the last stage if there are controversies in the choice or in the different jurisdictions?
I think. Well, I guess that's the issue when two parties disagree on an outcome. Can we keep going to different arbitrators? And I think actually no, it'd be implicit. So the landowner would be basically the decision maker. So you can have an ultimate decision maker. If we're in this hotel and we have an issue, maybe the hotel facilitates an arbitrator for certain issues, like we're in hotel rooms, I flood water into you, something like this. We go to them. And I think implicitly in the contract, it's agreed upon beforehand. If we have issues, we go and abide by the hotel's arbitration. So yeah, it could be absolutely a geographical territory. The property owners run the arbitration. That's okay. But the issue, I think, is when you have mass-scale nation-states trying to do this, it's kind of like the subsidiarity principle. Let the local governments do what they can at the most, and then maybe you get to the state governments and what they can do, and then you go to the federal government, okay? And I think if you have that kind of principle for justice, then it's going to be much more just than when it's the top-down nation-state running it. Yeah.
Fantastic answer, thank you.
Okay, cool.
So, let's investigate a little bit on the spark of this discussion about justice. You say the governmental way to judge is corruptible, can be easily biased. So you don't believe in the claim we have in every tribunal in Italy, la legge è uguale per tutti, the law is equal for everybody, because if it's corruptible, it's not. So how do you get rid of this problem in private legislation, in private judges, and even in this reasoning to scale up to more towards the federal situation? How do you protect your thesis from this risk of corruption?
From corruption.
Yeah.
Well, I think I love this quote from Michael Malice, which he says, the best criticisms of anarchy are just descriptions of the status quo. The judges are corrupt now. They're bought off now. They're paid by the lobbyists who write the legislation to enforce those laws. These people are not, impressive people. I actually became friends recently with the prosecutor in Los Angeles, and she's like, judges are like some of the worst people. Super easy to buy off, but they're run by the government. They work for the government, the federal government. So it's like, yeah, that's the issue. To resolve it, I think, is you have more privatization. When you allow the door for, public interest or this form of government running justice, then it's like it's already being corrupted. But when it's privatized and you have a market, you have choices, okay, then it's like going to restaurants. I know this restaurant doesn't actually make the food they're advertising, then I'm not going to go there. Or this movie's not getting good ratings, then I'm not going there. And we can basically have the contracts of where we live, of like where we can go for options. Even insurance companies would be the natural framework for governance in free societies, because they have the for-profit incentive to take care of their assets. The insurance companies, your insurance company will basically go to these arbitration agencies on your behalf. And the best ones, the most reputable ones, will be the aristocratic ones, the noble ones. They'll be trustworthy and reputable. And I think it will be simple. Justice will be simple. If you violate someone else's property, then that's going to probably incur a cost. And that cost will probably be a monetary payment in forms of restitution to pay back pretty much the debt you incurred.
I think it's a very interesting answer. Maybe let's step back to the nature of law, common law versus civil law. I think we can agree in which one to privilege. What do you think? Which one do you prefer?
I always get these confused, so I might make a mistake here.
Common law is the legislation based on the precedent. So the judge decides, and this makes the law. Civil law and common law is the Anglo-Saxon tradition. Civil law is the continental Europe tradition, full of codes.
Yep.
That is emanated by the parliament. I know I've been talking with many persons in the field, and they are telling me that even America, of course, being in the common law framework, is switching, especially for some precise niche like financial regulation, to some precise code. This is not something not very, very nice, you know. If you step back to the Hume's law that says you cannot derive prescriptive propositions from descriptive ones, you see that the civil law, in some degradations and development, is not the normal development of any code, is to overregulate, going towards the very precise situation, and then getting far and far from what Hayek said about the requirements of a law to be general and abstract. So I believe common law in theory is more convincing. You know, you see even Hayek in LLL, famous book, Law, Legislation and Liberty, wrote about this nature of law that should be just the formalization of some use, some habit of people, that is some spontaneous order regulation, both in formalizing them, even if in oral way, both in enforcing through these small tribunals in every context. So common law is more natural to our framework, I guess, and you have, I think, the same idea, because civil law would be too much prescriptive from some very, very...
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but when you first described, you laid out common law and civil law, I was going to say civil law because it seemed right, but then when you gave this analysis and you made the case for common law...
Go ahead, please.
Well, I think that all law... I have to refer to John Hassness' works, because he talks about basically all tort law, which I think is civil law, if I'm not mistaken. I forget, but basically laws come from new situations, new problems that arise, and so naturally we resolve it. So all laws do, in a way, derive from the market, from social cooperation, society, and solving issues. And so, I mean, I guess I'm still a little bit confused on the distinction, but the top-down government laws, I think, are not, I don't know, sometimes they work, but sometimes they work because the market already solved it, and sometimes they're too much law. So, I guess my point is that a lot of people confuse morality with legality. And that's why you have conservatives who say, like, obey the law. Like, why? You know, that's my anarchist instinct to say that. So, I don't know, maybe I need to review more of this civil versus common law. My assumption would be that there's some decency and rationale within both, but I think I'm just not too well versed on...
Oh, of course, and you're totally right, because the difference between these two framework is fading, you know, and they are getting closer, and there is the good part that is let the judge, assuming justice is just, decide about some situation according to the values, the tradition, and what was spontaneously arrived through conventions among people within a society, in a framework, political, legal system. The other one is what the public choice school warns us about, that is the tendency for the politician to overregulate, decide everything, be happy if many things pass through his hands. So, in theory, there is a classic liberal predilection towards common law, not civil law, but we'll investigate more, and the difference is fading away even in Anglo-Saxon context. But I think let me introduce a new topic. You know, we always, as we said earlier, be a little bit distant in my classic liberal moderate view of the social sciences and your anarcho-capitalist framework. So what doesn't convince you in Hayek? That is where I know the most. You could ask the same about Mises and you can spot my gaps. But let's talk about Hayek.
I mean, unfortunately, Hayek was in a tough position between the anarcho-capitalist and the probably last, classical liberal to some degree. And I think he just got the beating and the brunt of the jokes by the Austrian economist who said, yeah, Hayek, he's a socialist. Look at his book, Constitution and Liberty. There's many things you can point to it that sound like what a socialist would write. And I mean, maybe you know better than I am, better than I do about Hayek's intellectual career and history of when he was sympathetic to socialism. I believe when he first was a young student, and then he met Mises, and Mises taught him a lot. But then when he went to the London school and met Keynes, and maybe not Keynes directly, but was influenced towards some of these ideas. I haven't read, unfortunately, too much of Hayek. I think I will get to him some more, but what doesn't convince me, unfortunately, I think is he's just not Austrian enough.
You anticipated my question. So you see a clear division within the Austrian School of Economics from Mises thread and Hayek one. And where do you put Menger?
Menger is the GOAT. I mean, this podcast is named after Menger.
I know, it's a provocation.
Yeah. Menger, essentially, his book Principles of Economics is what Mises read, and Mises credits that to making Mises an economist. So I think Menger, very profound professor of economics in Vienna, and I love Menger.
Me too. This is a problem. So is there a division or not in the Austrian? Maybe if there is a division between a more evolutionistic stream in the Hayek side and more, don't get angry, but I see too much rationalism in Mises and Rothbard's side is sparking since the second generation on.
I find a much more interesting distinction within the Austrian school is between Mises and Rothbard, specifically on ethics.
Super interesting, tell me.
Yes, so Rothbard, he developed his idea of natural law and natural rights, which were derived from the fact that, human beings are living, and that he said we have natural rights, and these are your property rights, and that any infringement or violation of your person or property is immoral. And that's objective ethics. Mises, if you read Human Action, Mises was always a subjectivist. And so Mises did not have this idea of objective ethics. And what the Menger Institute, me and Daran and our core members, we follow more this Misesian, Mengerian tradition of subjectivism. There's no such thing as objective ethics. This is like the fall, the heir of libertarianism is this idea, because we have states violate rights all the time, not even states, individuals. Someone can come in here, they can shoot us, rob us, rape us, God forbid, but these things are all within human nature. So let's not say that that's immoral. I don't think that helps. But let's have true institutions, cultures that naturally can deter these, let's call them primitive animalistic behaviors and create more social cooperation. And that's just a deepening division of labor. Now extend that to the world. It's the nation states that are primitive, being scarce and short-sighted and wanting to wage wars for resources when we can just trade with all these nations and we'll both be more prosperous. So it's, the air of libertarianism in the Austrian school, unfortunately, is with these objective ethics of Rothbard and stuff, and I think that was a stray when we could have kept it beautiful, subjective ethics and in anarchy, and see that culture creates what's ethical and moral, but it's subjective.
Well, in this we are totally in agreement. I've been reading a lot and thinking a lot analysis against Rothbard. that I find very convincing. There are some philosophers of knowledge I like in Italy, Antiseri, who is a follower of Gadamer and Popper, claiming that Rothbard is wrong in exactly the same things that you say. So Hayekians and Misesians, I think, agree in criticizing this very harmful degeneration of the Rothbard side.
Yeah. Maybe this is the true Hayekian triangle with Mises, Hayek, and Rothbard agreeing and disagreeing. A triple Venn diagram.
Let's start the new interpretation of the Austrian school today from this triangle. It's gaining one more dimension from the monodimensional earlier.
Yeah, where they overlap and not overlap. Yeah, I don't know. I like Hayek, but yeah, it's interesting.
Next topic. Who interviews the other one?
Okay, I like
AI and Mises.
Oh, wow, beautiful. AI and Mises.
This is very philosophical, you know.
Okay, I kind of cut you off. If you want to elaborate a little bit more.
No. Human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. Do you see any possibility of catching up of artificial intelligence to the human one, and how Misesian or your ethics see this debate? You can feel free to involve any other fields of the science.
Okay. Yeah. So I think, as far as strictly artificial intelligence and human intelligence, it's kind of it's replicating what is already knowledge in existence that comes from human beings. So all the knowledge comes from human beings. Now, it is interesting when AI is like developing codes for like new viruses, let's say, then this is probably something that could be developed in time by humans, but the efficiency of AI to do these things makes it more efficient, let's say. That's just a side note. With Mises, and specifically going back 100 years ago to Mises's economic calculation problem for why is the impossibility of socialism, a lot of people talk about, well, if we have AI, supercomputers, then we can have a centrally planned society and socialism. And it's not true, because the knowledge that exists in the market society is tacit, it's dynamic, it's evolving, and it's not something that can be formalized, centralized, or it's tacit. The nature of this knowledge is human. The nature of AI is artificial. So it's a synthesis of human formal knowledge, but not human tacit knowledge. The practices of how to construct these buildings and the interior design and the colors that they evoke, the emotions, the human aspects, these things are still very human. We're not living in a virtual world. So I'm optimistic in the productivity that can come along with AI, but I don't think it will ever like create a socialist society, and I don't think it will be capable of that. I don't think it will create new knowledge, but it can allow for the efficiency of human beings to discover and create new knowledge. If that makes sense.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So AI is trained in what human intelligence created. So there is a logical problem if you think that AI can do a step ahead and develop something new. Totally agree. And even from the medical neuroscience point of view, science is not able to replicate, to model one-on-one the human brain. So you can reason in other matches, in other courts, but not in overcoming the human brain performances if you still don't understand how the synapses happen and if you still cannot model it. So going back to my Latin framework, there is a pars construens and a pars demonstrans. Pars construens, and when you build up, demonstrans is when you think to destroy because you have to refuse some hypothesis. So I think for the pars construens, AI cannot help so much, as you said, can help in recollecting something almost discovered by man, like in this tracking of DNA to map the viruses and stuff, but it's something already developed in a very, very advanced way by our scientific situation. So, for example, going very practical, how do you use AI? I guess to gather information, and then you reason with your own head, and you do steps ahead, you push ahead your frontier of knowledge by some spark, some connection, something that AI cannot do because it's something already discovered,
Yeah. Yeah, nice. I agree. Do you think people are discussing AI taking jobs, and this is another type of societal revolution and reformulation? What do you think about this and AI and art? What do you think Leonardo and Michelangelo would think about AI and art?
It's a very interesting question. You spark a world of things to say. Yesterday evening I had a great conversation with my libertarian friends, and going back to this reasoning, AI, if you pretend to do new art with AI, you have to rely on something already built and created by artists who are protected by intellectual property. Who protects IP? The state. So even within classic liberals, there is this difference in who protects, who doesn't want to protect the intellectual property. So does the protection of new patents incentivize the innovation, or it doesn't matter? There is a book, the most important book for the broad public, written by the professor I just mentioned earlier from Washington University in St. Louis, Boldrin, whose co-author David Levine is from your same state. They wrote together this book I recommend to everyone, super, super intellectually stimulating, against intellectual property, claiming through some very interesting examples. The most important one is about James Watt and the steam machine, who was protected by this patent. This fact impeded to exploit the full potential of innovation at that age, protecting this random person, James Watt, when other 30 or 40 engineers were just a step ahead, close to him, maybe behind, and were about to discover the same thing. So you impeded this innovation, the spread of new technology, because you needed to help this guy to make money with this protection. So as you can see, I'm not in favor of intellectual property protection. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, did you mention Professor Stephen Kinsella?
No, David Levine.
David Levine, okay. Are you familiar with Stephen Kinsella?
No, but tell me, I'm super curious.
He writes against intellectual property rights as well.
Same title.
Yeah. Maybe his work is different titles. Forgive me. He's going to be on the podcast in 4 days. So
fantastic.
Yeah. But I agree. Yeah. I mean, even in the market, for example, in the marketplace, people think, we need the state to protect intellectual property. It's not true. Amazon, if you publish a book, wants to protect its authors. So if someone takes the book and wants to republish it, Amazon won't let that happen, because then no one would write any more books. So Amazon wants to have regulations to make sure the author is publishing this and it's his rights, or he gave the rights to someone else. And so that's how you can publish a book on Amazon in the marketplace. So it wouldn't be everyone would just steal intellectual property and no one would be able to make money. If you make a new superfood, a super ingredient, and you take it to the market, the facilitators selling it want to protect you as the inventor of this, so they can keep the market existing. Because then if you have these other people copying and reproducing it, then it doesn't incentivize new productions. So the market organizes to facilitate more and new production. I like that argument against it.
A smart objection I got yesterday evening from very smart friends of mine was put in case J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter. wasn't protected after the first Harry Potter, de facto allowing anyone else to keep writing, basing on this first book, and so lowering the incentive for the original author to keep writing. What do you think? Do you need the state protection of the trademark? Or
No, of course not. I think it's like what they call canon, with like Star Wars, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like many people write Star Wars fan fiction, and then you have like the Star Wars institution saying this is canon and this is not canon. So like someone's, you know, that's why I'm against intellectual property. Look at music. Someone writes a chord progression. You can't copyright chords, and then they try to say, well, you can copyright melodies, but even that's like, or just you find the original and you appreciate it, but people innovate in music. Like that's kind of the beauty of music. Everyone's innovating on what previously has existed and trying to do their own thing. And if you just reproduce it, then it's not new, and it can get some attraction and whatnot, but the original then would, I think, eventually be the most attractionable and protected by these third-party institutions, Spotify, I think, to like make sure that the original maintains in that position of what it is versus the copies. Yeah.
My answer was closer to yours. I didn't mention the canon, but I mentioned the first mover advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Means that I did this example. It's not the same field, but I think it's very interesting to reason about Bitcoin. You know, the protocol of Bitcoin is public, so even you and me, we can do the MR coin, replying one-on-one the Bitcoin. But in this case, it's very difficult that we can beat the dominant player in the market with the same stuff. So we have to differentiate a little bit, and I don't know. For this reason, I studied this thing. I did a quick master in this, in Bitcoin and DLT. I wasn't convinced in the value of Bitcoin technology because I thought it was replicatable. You can reply the same and go in the market and convince people to buy yours, allowing Bitcoin to causing a loss of value of some theoretically good store of value that is Bitcoin. But then the first mover advantage is very important. So I agree with you with J.K. Rowling example. So I don't know, open source. What do you think? It's coherent next chapter of our discussion in this line, or?
Yes, I think we have maybe a few minutes left before we're physically removed from the private property. So let me ask you, is there anything else you would like to mention or discuss?
What do you have in mind?
I don't know. Up to you. If you have some closing thoughts or even words of advice for some people, maybe some young students who watch this.
Fantastic. I have one. I have an advice to study. The more you go towards the STEM topics, the more you open the doors for your future choices. In the social sciences field, especially economics, causal inference, statistics, I know it's something that is not very convincing from a point of view of a classic liberal, because the inference is a big problem, you know. Popper told us about this is the inductive and not the deductive scientific method, but reasoning with data, if you have to find the best compromise to read trends, to forecast in finance, economics, whenever you can choose something closer to econometrics, causal inference, statistics, do it. You have to master these things before to be critic, and if you are critic, good. If you're not, at least you learn something, and you can have much broader spectrum of possibilities in the job market. That these times, as you said earlier, with the AI putting stick in the wheels of the bicycle, as we say in Italy, for who is looking for a job now. It's very important to have these things in your toolkit in order to be more powerful in negotiating a position from a quantitative point of view. And there are many scientists that at the end of the day are passionate in philosophy, art. We can talk for other 3 hours about connection between science and art, symmetries, or science and literature, with many discourses in neuroscience that have been made before from one or more literary novels. So it's super interesting, even psychology. I feel that I know you love. Study science, study math, study statistics, and then you can go to the otium side after you deal with the negotium.
Fantastic. Riccardo, thank you very much. This was a pleasure.
My pleasure, Matti. See you next time.
Yes. Thank you. Peace.